He can't play at a high level anymore. I don't know how much more evidence you need.
When is it time to turn to the rookie? The Giants have answered that question this week, seemingly deciding, in the immortal words of the John Cena walkout song, the time is now. But the Browns are still starting their veteran quarterback. The Saints are keeping their rookie on the sideline too. And then there is the Vikings, who just had their best game of the year with a veteran quarterback and might need to decide whether or not to go back to their rookie when he is healthy. Welcome to the SumerSports Show. I'm Lindsay Rhodes with Sam Bruckhouse. This is what we're going to be talking about today. The process that teams go through in making this decision about their rookie quarterback. Sam will tell us what he's dug up in regards to the data, about whether teams get better once that rookie goes in, when the rookie tends to go in, whether the coaches end up keeping their jobs as a result of a rookie going in, and whether the rookie ends up being any good. We'll also welcome Mike Mayock to the show to discuss the things that teams are thinking about that may not be readily apparent to those of us on the outside. And then Brian Hoyer is going to join us also, a 15-year veteran quarterback who played for 9 different teams, 5 of which had rookie quarterbacks that played in their rookie years. He's seen it all. We're going to talk to him about what he's observed about rookie quarterbacks and what they are ready and not ready to do right out of the gate. We're hoping that this conversation addresses the topic that everyone is talking about this week, but in a different way than you're hearing it discussed elsewhere. Sam, I'm really excited to dig into this, as it's a conversation that seems to come up quite frequently.
Right. And I think so many people focus on rookie quarterbacks for the offseason and in the season, but you mentioned the John Cena theme song, The Time Is Now. The real question for a lot of these head coaches and general managers is the same question that John Cena is asking himself right now. The last time is now. Will it be the last time for these general managers and head coaches to make this type of decision, given how it will play out as the season goes along?
How frequently are we in this situation? Because it feels like there's a couple of times every year where we're like, when do we turn to this rookie quarterback? And of course, everybody knows narratively the most popular person in an NFL city that is has a struggling NFL team is the backup quarterback. How frequently are we actually here?
Right. So typically we see any rookie quarterback, for regardless of reason, we see that about 60 of those have started since the new CBA in 2011. I went through individually and read news clippings to try to figure out why those players were inserted into the lineup. And we saw about 37 going back to 2011. So that's about a 15-year sample size. So frankly, this is a pretty small sample size issue in which we're going to get a sense of what will actually happen, but it's difficult to say what the true truth value is about these rookie quarterbacks playing midseason.
Yeah, there are a few that we can think of anecdotally, like Herbert came in because of an injury, was probably going to come in at some point anyway, but like was forced into action. So we can anecdotally think of examples like that. Do teams get better after they move to the rookie quarterback? Because that's obviously one of the things that's always in consideration is the team is struggling, so go ahead and put that guy in.
The short answer is that the teams rarely get better. Typically, we see that these teams, before going in to a rookie midseason switch, are about one of the worst teams in the league, typically have about a 33% win rating, regardless of when they decide to put that quarterback in. And afterward, it's still in between about 30 and 40%. So this decision is not going to radically change the team strength, at least as it pertains to what we've seen since the new CBA and since teams have been more readily able or willing to put in these rookie quarterbacks.
Do you have any data that tells you an average draft position for these teams the next year to kind of paint a picture of just how much they don't get better?
Typically, if you're switching to a rookie quarterback, you will be drafting early in the draft. Typically, we see that these teams are around the 4th, 5th, or 6th pick in the next year.
Okay. That paints a very specific picture. Other consideration here, in addition to whether the team gets better or not, let's say that I am willing to concede that they're not going to get better, but I just want to see the rookie develop, right? Like, let's go ahead and give this guy some extra reps, A, to see what we have with him, but B, to just get this whole party started a little bit faster, sooner rather than later. The downside to that is whether or not this will be detrimental to the rookie quarterback's development curve if you're going into a bad situation. Do we see evidence of that?
Within the year, we typically see that they will be a bottom end starter if they do reach the requisite number of dropbacks to get there. We do see that typically they will start about 8 games in the year. They're gonna have about a 59% completion percentage, not very good. Yards per attempt, not going to be very good. And then moving forward in their career, we typically see that players who are inserted in their first year start about 33% of the games for the rest of their career. That is a very wide distribution. Some of these players, like Justin Herbert and thus far Drake May, will start most every single game that you can see. But then again, there's going to be the players that start a couple of games, you realize you don't have something there and will never start ever again. This is a true wide distribution, and that's shown by the average being 33%, that including some of those really, really high-end players, but the median being more around 25%. So there's about a 15 to 16% difference in the average and median there. That shows that there's a wide distribution of how this can end up.
Can you, with the names in front of you who kind of fit into this category, are there any examples that you can point to that maybe drive those averages down? Like guys who did go in because of dire circumstances, not because the team was like, hey, we think this guy might be the guy, and we are very purposefully putting him on the field.
Right. I think the most dire circumstances in recent years has been Ryan Finley, who you may not even remember his name. This was in Zach Taylor's first year with the Bengals. They were having massive issues at the quarterback position. They had already moved on from Andy Dalton, had already circled through many people. It was a dire situation. They had drafted him and felt good about him, launched him in. He ended up only playing a single extra season in his career. That's an extremely dire circumstance. On the flip side of that, you have Josh Rosen, one of the most highly drafted quarterbacks and highly touted quarterbacks during his draft class. He was considered the most NFL-ready quarterback. They put him in Arizona for one season. By the next season, it was a whole new staff. Kyler Murray was on the team, and he was in a different jersey. And soon enough, about 3-4 years later, he was out of the league.
There's another example here. I'm looking at the Brian Hoyer career stats in anticipation of welcoming him into this conversation later. Ryan Lindley in 2012 got into a game on the Cardinals when Brian Hoyer was there. He was a 6th round pick. So that can't at all have been purposeful also. So there are examples like that. Okay, so flip side of this, then let's say, okay, so maybe this is not ideal for development, whether it is extremely bad or detrimental, we'll have that conversation. But does the success rate for quarterbacks go up if they do, in fact, sit an entire year?
If they do sit an entire year, the data indicates that it is good if your team is good. And Lindsay, this is where this becomes one of the most interesting problems in the National Football League and in football as a whole. There is an idea that comes down from Nobel Prize winning economics professors at UChicago and Penn that there is a true loser's curse in the National Football League. What is that loser's curse? It's the idea that if you are having to switch quarterbacks, you are probably not a good team. And teams that have to switch quarterbacks are in the face of the quarterback prediction problem. We're not necessarily good as a whole at predicting who the best quarterbacks are, which thus makes you a loser, and so forth and so on. And so it is very difficult for teams to get out of this cycle. It does take a degree of luck. And as a result, you get in this kind of spiral where we don't necessarily know if it's good for development. We just know that if you're on a bad team, it's probably going to be rough for the quarterback. But if you're on a good team, like the situation that we saw Patrick Mahomes walk into after a season of sitting, then you're probably going to be good. That's really the only correlation that we can truly find about sitting your quarterbacks, is that there's a positive correlation between team strength and quarterback play.
Are we in some ways seeing evidence of that loser's curse play out in different ways as we speak right now? The top 4 quarterbacks this week: Sam Darnold, Marcus Mariota, Daniel Jones, Geno Smith, none of who, that's 1 through 4 in the year 2025, none of whom are notably playing on the team that drafted them.
100%. The teams that drafted them, for the most part, were in dire straits. And I think we're also seeing that in a smaller, with less sample size view with Cam Ward, Brian Callahan, and the Titans as well right now, in which this team was selecting first last year. Thus, they got a quarterback, and that team is still a team that was probably going to select first last year. And I think it's just very difficult to get a true read on a team when you are a measure not as good as the teams that you're playing. And that's typically why the draft works the way it does. But the draft is a very sticky and hard thing to get around.
Before we get to Mayock, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the Giants move specifically. Do you think that it was the right call?
I think the biggest question here is, do you think your team is better than the preseason 5.5 win total? And I think there are arguments for that and against that. I think the argument for that would be that you truly believe in your defensive front. We've seen Brian Burns be an absolute standout through a couple of weeks. We've seen Abdul Carter kind of play a little bit more hybrid role, but as he comes along, the defense could start playing better. We've also seen Malik Neighbors be able to be a pretty good wide receiver. The real question is, with the quarterback position, is will you be able to get that ball in the hands of your best player as much? The problem that we're seeing with JJ McCarthy in a Vikings uniform right now is not that Justin Jefferson is playing worse. It's not that TJ Hawkinson is playing worse. It's that their targets per route run is in the middle of the pack, while their yards per route run and their target share are up. Can Jackson Dart get the ball in the hands of those wide receivers is the massive question here. And can he do that better than Russell Wilson? I personally think that's a real testy decision. I think we saw Russell Wilson 2 weeks ago have an all-pro level game. He followed it up with a pretty low-level game. I think that could lead to less inconsistencies. I don't necessarily know what's going on in the locker room per se, but I think that's a real test, especially given the small sample size we've seen from Russell Wilson, that a rookie is going to be substantially better and up that win total.
Yeah, I've got some thoughts on this subject matter also, but Mike Mayock has hopped into the room, so let's go ahead and welcome him into this conversation because I am more eager to hear his thoughts on the subject. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How you guys doing?
Doing very well. You heard what Sam had to say there about this move from a Dart standpoint. We'll zoom out and talk about all of the different things that go into making this kind of a decision. But since we're already talking about this one, do you have any reaction to the things that Sam said or anything you want to add to that conversation?
You know, the last couple of years, I've come a long way with analytics and watching and studying and having a chance to kind of sit back without any pressure on me and think it through. And for an old guy, I think I've come a long way. However, I struggle with this particular data and how it relates in any way, shape, or form to the real world. And I don't mean that as a shot at all. I think there are so many variables in all these situations going back 20, 30, whatever year, how many years you want to go. And they're all individual based on a lot of different factors. So to give you an example, I don't really care about the 5.5 win total and which quarterback's going to beat it, because they're probably not going to be very good anyway. Okay. Yeah. And the whole point of taking a quarterback in the first round is to develop the kid. You're kind of saying, we know we're not going to be very good for a little while, but we need to develop the kid and the team along with him so that jointly we can get to a point where we're really happy with who we are. So starting with a matrix of 5.5, I don't get that. And maybe I don't get it because I'm not smart enough to get it. But from a pure football perspective, can I give you a quick overview of how I look at this whole?
Please do.
Not just Jackson Dart, but the whole thing. Yep. Is that fair?
Yeah.
The way I look at it is a fit. Okay. And there's got to be a fit on both sides of the equation before you can play the kid. So from the kid's perspective, man, how many college starts did he have? What's his work ethic like? How tough a kid is he, both physically and emotionally? Because he's probably going to get the crap beat out of him. And I get the physical toughness, but emotionally, everybody's going to tell him he sucks when he's been the number one guy his entire life. They're not going to win a lot of games. You know, how does he handle all that? What's his football IQ? The kid has to be ready to help protect himself, is what I'm trying to say, number one. Number two, is the team ready? What's the infrastructure like? Are you going to give him an environment where he's protected and has an ability to grow? Okay? So Do you have a run game? How much defense do you play? Very importantly, who's your play caller and what's his plan? How much skill position talent do you have around you? And finally, everybody talks about pass protection's critical. Everybody talks about an O-line, but again, I think it's a bigger picture. It starts with the pass protection starts with the quarterback, not with the offensive line. And if they're bringing 6 and you only got 5 to protect, you better know which guy's coming and how to beat that. And it's not easy.
That's the Anthony Richardson example that we saw in the preseason, right?
Yeah, and that's another one where you go back to how many starts. The old Bill Parcells / Sean Payton thing is you can't even draft a rookie quarterback if he hasn't started 25 games, and I'm kind of a believer in some of that. So really, when I take what I just said to you is both sides of the equation has to be a fit before the kid can play. I look at the 24 draft and I find it really intriguing because there were 6 taken in the first round. 3 of them started all 17 games. 2 of them went to the playoffs, right? I think that Jaden Daniels, the overall number 2 pick, had a historically significant year. And I can go back to 1983 with Dan Marino and tell you, I think the way he played is every bit as good as any rookie quarterback going back there. That's point number 1. Bo Nix, oh my goodness. I had a 2nd round grade on him, okay? But Bo Nix started, 61 games or whatever in college football. When Sean Payton took him in the first round, I started laughing because my grade was based more on traits and upside. And I know how Sean thinks because I played for Bill. And, he started a bunch of games. Denver's going to play really good defense. They're going to run the ball. They're going to play action. They're going to control the clock. The quarterback's got to be smart, efficient, tough. And that's who he is, right? So the fit with both of those guys was highly intriguing to me. So that's kind of and we can get into the 25 guys and Cam Ward and Jackson Dart all you want, but that's kind of the background and how I look at it is can you protect the kid? Can the kid protect himself? And how do we go forward big picture, not just in the next 12 games or next year, but how do we do what the Chiefs did with Patrick Mahomes and trade up to number 10 and change who we are?
So, Mike, I really love your approach to this because you even reminded me that I'm taking a little bit of a short-term approach, just given all the talk and the media around the Giants. But I want to ask you more generally, because this is a bigger problem, in business in general or decision-making in general. You broke down that short-term versus long-term approach, win now versus development. And it sounded like you believe that with regards to quarterbacks, it is always a long-term choice. Would you agree with that or no?
What I think is that historically, most of the time, it has been a long-term projection. What we've seen recently is that some quarterbacks have come into the league over the last 3 or 4 years and played at a level not expected. We already talked about Jaden Daniels. The year before that, C.J. Stroud. Now, there's been a little bit of a regression, but I don't think it's really all on C.J. I think there's some other factors there. I think the advent of the quarterback run, both planned and spontaneous, has helped some of the younger quarterbacks play better in the last 4, 5, 6 years, because they even go back to Cam Newton, because you have a chance with your legs to change the game a little bit and help both you play better and the team win. But I'm not sure if that answers your question or not, Sam, but that's why teams want quarterbacks that can extend plays.
I think from where I sit evaluating the Dart example, just as an example, but pretty much all of these situations, I don't care about the short term personally, because if you get to a point where you are looking at a team and you're saying, I'm done, like, just move on, just do it, then that's probably anecdotally evidence that a lot of the other stuff, you don't have expectations for the short term, right? Like, who cares if you win, to your point, Mayock, 6 games or 7 games, like whatever, like we're trying to become a good football team at some point. So then it immediately has shifted once you even start having this conversation to a long-term conversation. And then my concerns are more, is this detrimental to the development of this quarterback? Does this actually hurt us in the long term in an effort to help us in the long term?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that I know the answer to that, but I will say to the things that you just pointed out, is there a run game? I think that the emergence of Scattaboo in New York and him being a rookie and Malik Neighbors being a skill position player that's around him, to one of your other points, who is a high-end and also young guy, I would point to those two things as reasons that I feel like I would be more willing to, in this particular situation, move to the rookie, let them all start developing chemistry together. This is the plan. These three guys, these are your offensive guys that you're building around for the next however many years. Like, let's just start working on it. Is there anything to that? Or do you feel like there's something problematic perhaps in that approach?
No, I like that approach because I think the guy that's been under center, Russell Wilson, has proven since Denver, since he first went to Denver all the way up till today, that he can't play at a high level anymore. I mean, I don't know how much more evidence you need. There was a one-game aberration. So from my perspective, the next question is, in any way, shape, or form, are you going to hurt the development of this kid? If the answer is yes, you probably have to go with Jameis or Russell Wilson. However, what I would like as a GM or a head coach is I'd like the answer to that question to be, hey, this kid is going to get a little bit better every week because we believe in who he is. We believe in his toughness, his poise. I had a very similar grade to Bo Nix with Jackson Dart. I didn't have a first-round grade on him, but I had a very similar type grade. Played a lot of games. He's athletic enough. Has all of his physical traits are good enough that the composite is better than any individual trait. Okay, so if there's development of the kid, and Lindsay, you already mentioned all the other players that go along with that, I think he'll be a much better quarterback year two with that experience. Now, Sam, I would ask you, the caveat in all of that for me is when you throw all your data together, is there any place for head coaches and or GMs that are under pressure getting fired?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and one that we looked at. And in the last few years, you're looking at a 60 to 70% let go rate if you do move on. And you can think of even people in the past year in which that has occurred, and primarily Gerard Mayo, Patriots head coach, and a couple other examples. But that is another item that I'm very interested in your thoughts on, considering this long-term, short-term development style of decision-making, is the gross and unfortunate rate at which owners are willing to move on from the decision makers in their front office.
And also, Mike, I want to point out, I feel like this narratively is accepted to be the opposite is accepted to be true. Yeah. When we talk about this, we talk about it as if when they at some point, especially later in the year, pivot to the rookie quarterback, then that will buy them more time, because people will go, oh, well, look, we're building. And of course they weren't good because it's a rookie. And so there's built-in excuses. But the data tells us that the opposite is actually true.
Yeah, and it's intriguing because typically the head coach is the guy that's going to go. If the GM drafts a young quarterback, look in Chicago last year, Ryan Poles. They draft a rookie quarterback who starts all 17 games. And then B, they fire the head coach and bring in Ben Johnson, the hot young offensive coordinator, to develop the quarterback, game plan, all the rest of it. So I think there are different answers both for head coaches and GMs. And I look at the Giants situation. What's going on behind closed doors there is fascinating to me with both Joe Shane and Brian Daboll and whatever the ownership involvement is. I think there's a couple things here. My answer to what do you do was always whatever's best for the building, no matter how painful that may or may not be. That's what you got to do if you're a GM/head coach. Okay, so whoever has ultimate say in that building has got to sit there and say, I don't care that it's New York and the public wants Jackson Dart. We're 0-3. We're not going to be a playoff team. What is best for our team? And a big part of that is we drafted this kid to play, and therefore what's best for the timing of the development of this kid. Now, we already talked about, I think, and I think you guys think, if the kid can protect himself and you can protect him, he should play as many games as he can this year, and that'll be better for the Giants next year. Sam, you talked about injury. At Ole Miss last year, if you watch the tape, there was a lot of planned quarterback runs. He's not dynamic. We're not talking about Jaden Daniels or Lamar Jackson, but he's a good enough athlete that he can help your offense. So are you trying to protect the kid? Well, part of the reason you bought into his package is because he's a football player and you better use the full package, right? You can't be afraid, I don't think, and just say, are you smart about it? Hell yeah. Are you judicious about the quarterback runs? Is it in the fourth quarter on 3rd and 1 when everybody's going to tackle Scatterboo and you're just going to give him a chance to go? Yeah, I think you're judicious, Sam. I think that's what you're trying to do is use him intelligently, not crazily with his legs. But you can go back to friggin' 1999 with Peyton Manning and Ryan Leaf. One of them was emotionally secure, tough as hell, went 3-13 through 28 interceptions. And the other was emotionally scarred, not ready to play, played just as badly, if not worse. But Peyton Manning went 3-13. And even though he threw 28 interceptions, this special individual took that, turned the season around and the team the following year because he had that kind of toughness and maturity and talent. Now, I'm not trying to say Dart does or doesn't. I'm just saying that, you could, let's look at the opposite of that. David Carr. David Carr, his rookie year got sacked, I want to say 75 to 80 times. And in my opinion, we'll never know what David Carr could or couldn't have been after that season.
Yep.
Now, I know I'm just kind of going off because this is triggering a lot of stuff in my head, but trying to bring it back to Dart. Okay, we'll go with Dart. Awesome. How do we protect them? Where's that run game? Now we get that rookie going. Okay, where's our O-line, our injuries, etc.? How about play action? How are we going to get that animal we have outside more looks? How are we getting him more one-on-one touches? Let's manufacture touches to one. He's special. So what are we doing here to take some of the heat off of Jackson while also giving him the ability to grow with some confidence over time? And really, to me, it's different than Cam Ward, who we all knew was going to be the starting quarterback there. Mm-hmm. And all the stuff coming out of training camp was, he's ready to go, and this team's going to take off, and, blah, blah, blah. Well, we're 3 games into the season. He's been sacked 15 times, worst in the league. Remember what I said, pass protection starts with the quarterback. And number 2, he's completing 54% of his passes. And number 3, in another move that we're not really talking about, they're just announced that they're replacing their play caller on offense. Okay, so that we're talking about a quarterback change in New York, and we're talking about a coordinator change in Tennessee, and they're the 2 teams with potential rookie quarterbacks. So, Sam,
There's some like level setting of expectations that I think is so important when you bring a rookie quarterback in. Yep. And to me, the Cam Ward stuff, I don't care what happens this year. And so I know that not everyone is like this. Not everyone's going to look at this, but I'm like, I literally don't even want to look at it. I want to look at it, but I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to do any evaluation because my expectation going into the year is he's going to look like a rookie. And if he surpasses that expectation, he plays like Jaden Daniels did his rookie year, then I'm like, gravy, icing on the cake. That's amazing. But that's not my expectation ever for a rookie quarterback. And there's one specific example from this past weekend that I could point to watching college football, which I rarely do now because I just don't have the bandwidth. But then when I do drop into college football watching, it strikes me how different the game is than the NFL. And just there was an example in the USC game where, quarterback hits, I want to say it was like a running back in the flat, and I was like, oof, like why? That because my expectation is an NFL expectation that guy's getting collapsed on immediately, and that's going for no yards based on where the defenders were, and then it's 10 yards for a first down. And I'm like, oh, good call. But my expectation was that would not work. And so the reason why I tell this long-winded story is an example of how different things are in college and the NFL. And so a quarterback whose brain is wired to say, now, that's the window. All of those things that they do in college, and they establish this rhythm of understanding when to get the ball out and where to get the ball and what kinds of throws can be made. It's so different in the NFL. Those just don't exist. And so you have to relearn it. And so to a degree, I'm like, we're just going to give this several games and then we'll come back and we'll look, but I'm not going to, split hairs in games 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so to a degree, I think we just need to zoom back and say, okay, you're moving to a rookie quarterback. We'll watch the game, but now let's just take a step back in terms of evaluating. Let's not go into the whole, what did he do differently and better than Russell Wilson? Just, you have to be willing to understand it's just in some ways not going to look good right away. There is going to be a transition period.
Yeah. And really, I love the Bo Nix thing because that fit that I talk about, with Sean Payton and marriage with a run game and some defense, that gives him a chance as a rookie to compete. But Lindsay, you're correct that pretty much 90% of the time, especially by definition, these kids are getting drafted very high on poor teams. So the odds of them coming out and making a bad team a good team with little additional help is next to none. And I think level setting's critical. We know where Cam Ward was going to start. Now, this kid in New York, let's give him an opportunity to settle in. Let's give them an opportunity to figure out who he is and how to use him.
I'm really interested in this discussion of level setting, and Mike, in particular, you saying you got to do the best thing for the building, because I think in particular, this move, I don't know whether to take away from it that it says more about everyone else on the team. And if they're making this move, as you said, I think they believe it is the best thing for the building. And this is a veteran defense, and then an offense which has a young breakout player in Scattaboo, and a young breakout player as well in Malik Neighbors. What are those items that you highlight when you say it's better for the building, in particular with regards to the players? Because you got to have a buy-in of the full 22, right? You can't be trotting out a rookie quarterback just to see what he can do, because you got 21 other guys who are trying to get paid next year or in the following years, right?
Let's be real honest, okay? Players in an NFL locker room, when it comes to what can help them get better, are completely locked in. You can't BS them, okay? So if you bring a new assistant coach in, say you're a defensive back and you bring a defensive back coach in, they don't really care if that defensive back coach is 25, 55, or 75. They don't care if he's black or white. What they want to know is, can you help me get better individually, and can you help this team win? And they figure it out pretty quickly, okay? It's the same thing with young players. They come in, and especially at the quarterback position, and if the kid works his ass off and has a good football IQ, shows the other players that he's checking to the correct thing, that he pays attention, he's spending extra time, he's watching the film. So that translates to respect from the veteran community, okay? Ultimately, this kid's going to help us get better. What you're kind of bringing up, Sam, is the kid going to help us get better next week, right? And that's a tougher conversation. But again, I go back to Russell Wilson. And no offense to Russ, I love watching the guy play forever. But once he got to Denver, And I did a game or two of his in Denver, and I was like, wow, what's going on here? And I thought that might be an aberration, but everywhere he's gone since then, it's been bad. So if you're a veteran in that locker room, you're going to say nothing but good things about Russ. But at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're going, can we win more games with Jameis or Dart? Who's going to help us be better? And it's interesting because the Jameis thing is a little different now. You know, Jameis started some games in Cleveland last year, and he beat Pittsburgh one week. And he just ripped the crap out. Maybe, no, I'm sorry, it was Baltimore. He ripped Baltimore one day, shredded them. I watched the tape. I was like, whoa. But that's the teaser with Jameis, because the other shoe's going to drop when he starts throwing 4 interceptions in a game. I'm guessing, I haven't been in their building, I'm guessing the Dart kid has earned the respect of the players and the coaches. I'm guessing the talent level's where it needs to be. And I'm guessing because of that, they're all going, okay, let's go. Let's go get better. Whether it's in the short term, maybe not. But in the long term, over the rest of the season, yeah, we have a chance to get better. There's some really fascinating topics around this conversation. You know, we've talked about Cam Ward and Jackson Dart. We talked a little bit about, I find that 24 draft class fascinating. I want to see what Caleb does with Ben Johnson, even though Ben Johnson, interestingly enough, comes from Jared Goff, completely different style quarterback. So his play calling has to kind of meld into what Caleb does well, not what Jared did well. So I find that fascinating. I thought Drake May played pretty well. He had 30 college starts. Penix had 48 starts. And the whole Atlanta thing, guys, like both your opinions on this. The Atlanta thing last year was really, I think one of the biggest mistakes NFL teams do is they're not intentional about the most important the most important position in all sports, the quarterback position. So like if you have a quarterback, awesome, let's roll. Don't worry about the backup. If you don't have one, guess what? You're another day closer to getting fired. So we're going to reach and push kids up into the draft where they shouldn't be, because we just got to go get one. So last year, Atlanta signs Kirk Cousins. A year off an Achilles. Red flag in my GM head, okay? A year off Achilles at the quarterback position. I don't know. And then they surprise everybody by taking Michael Penix, and people killed him. Oh, you're already paying this guy. You're already doing it. And I'm sitting there going, are you kidding me? Most important position of all sports. They took a kid 8th overall. He's on a rookie scale. So the extra amount that filters into the Cousins thing really doesn't make a difference. And guess what? You've provided insurance if Cousins can't go. If Cousins can go, it's awesome because the kid can learn from him and develop at a certain. So it kind of goes back to, and then Green Bay, they've been intentional since Brett Favre. They traded for a former second-round pick in Atlanta, and ultimately he starts a bunch of years at a high level. A bunch of years later, Aaron Rodgers slides to them. They didn't expect it. They told me that. They didn't expect Aaron Rodgers to be there at 24 or 25, 26, wherever it was. But they were smart enough to say, that's a gifted kid. There's value there. We don't know where or how long Brett's going to be here. Let's take him. And then they do the same thing years later with Jordan Love, who, by the way, the jury is still out on, in my opinion. But the important thing was both Atlanta and Green Bay, and if you want to take it another level, and Washington re-signing Mariota as the backup, all are being intentional about that position. And you saw, we talked about the importance of a play caller. How about Mariota last week with Cliff Kingsbury? Right? Cliff Kingsbury, what's he doing with Jaden Daniels? Gosh, there's so many things interconnected about all these that the intentionality of the whole thing I find mind-boggling in the NFL.
It also strikes me the difference in situations of the teams that you described there. Like the Packers making the draft moves that they make. Well, I was going to say that they have a little bit more like rope with which to make those moves. There are some teams that just desperately need help right away. Like, I need this first rounder to hit the field immediately. I can't put someone on the bench, which makes the Falcons pick so interesting because you could have argued, like, how many guys that they could have drafted in that spot that they would have put on the field right away. But ultimately, if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have anything. And so the Browns are a situation of a team that I don't know if you could put them in the intentional quarterback bucket or not. But they're another team that kind of fits this conversation to a degree because you've got these rookies sitting on the bench and then you've got Joe Flacco and there was clearly an aging placeholder type of quarterback. And then the question becomes, as Dion pointed out yesterday, he said that he's making a prediction that Shedeur is going to start this year and that he thinks he knows when. I don't know if it's going to be Shedeur or Dylan Gabriel or not, but I also have a prediction, and it has to do with the schedule. And if you have a veteran bridge quarterback and then you have rookies that at some point you think you might not win enough games, you might not be in the playoff hunt, and it will be in your best benefit to get them on the field. I want to, before we say goodbye to you, get your thoughts on looking at the schedule and how you make that decision. And I know that you weren't in a position to do that because you had Derek Carr your entire career in Las Vegas. But do you think that that is something that you would do? Do you think that that is something that teams do?
Yeah, I think the combination of it kind of goes back a little bit to the level of expectation, and how many wins and how secure the coach is, the GM is. I think a lot of things go into when do you play a rookie. I'd like to say that, what we started with, which is when the kid's ready and the team's ready for him, what's best for the building. That's where my mind always goes, but it's not always reality. So,
what's best for the building and him might also in some cases be to have a bye week to get under center and get all of those reps. It might be first game being against a team that we think he can have success against, which notably is not the situation that Jackson Dart's going to step into against the Chargers defense. But I digress.
Yeah, and I took a quick look at their schedule before we came on, and I forget it now, but I mean they have the Eagles twice in a 4-week period, right. With the Chargers. I think there's a New Orleans Saints game in there, and then there's a couple other tough ones. So
Chargers at New Orleans, Eagles at Denver, at Philly.
Eagles at Denver, at Philly. Oh. Those are really, and by the way, Vic Fangio, I love Vic.
Yes.
Joe Woods, love Joe. I mean, there are no breaks in there other than maybe New Orleans. That's some hard sledding for a rookie, but I think they felt like they had to do it now. I mean, I look at Cleveland, Linz, and I mean, Kevin Stefanski's a Philly guy, and his dad was a GM in the NBA. Eddie the Shot Stefanski. They called him a shot in Philly because he couldn't shoot, which is a typical Philly thing. But Stefanski and Andrew Burry are brilliant. They're both Ivy League guys. I've known Joe Flacco since he was 20 years old, and he's a Jersey Shore guy. I don't think you want your game plan for him to start 17 games because A, he's going to break down, and B, he's going to start throwing interceptions.
Yeah.
So to your point, Linz, do I see, and I would see Dylan Gabriel next. Every indication from Kevin has been, throughout camp, and they've protected that he's a 3rd-round pick. The other kid's a 5th-round pick. So that's what we're doing. So I think if you see anybody in the near future, it's going to be the 3rd-round pick, Dylan Gabriel, first.
Let me read you their schedule. So we already know the first 3. Cincinnati, at Baltimore, at Green Bay. Now they have at Lions, then they have Minnesota, then they are at Pittsburgh. Then in week 7, and this is the one that I have highlighted as a possibility here, Dolphins, week 8 Patriots. So then you've got 2 weeks where a rookie quarterback could feasibly come in and maybe start to have a little bit more success, or you could wait for the bye week in week 9. Those are the 2 that I have circled as possible starting points for a rookie if you were going to pivot. And then again, like you said, it will depend largely on whether or not they think they're ready, right?
And also where the team is.
True.
There are 2 sides to that. Just
coming off a win against Green Bay.
Well, yeah, and right now their defense is one of the best in the league.
Exactly, Sam. Right? Their defense is lights out. They're knocking the crap out of people right now. So What's interesting to me is that if you're starting Flacco, you're throwing the ball 30 times a game and he's ripping it all over the place. If you go to the other kids, especially if you trust one of them, Dylan Gabriel, because he's next, to do what Bo Nix has done and what the Giants are hoping Jackson Dart will do, which is run the ball more. And hey, Kevin Stefanski wants to run the football. Okay, that's his DNA. Run the football, play action. He's more like a Sean Payton guy than he is rip it around the ball yard, but that's who Joe Flacco is. So he wants to get under center. He now got Judkins back the last, right? So now he's a downhill play action. Joe's not running bootleg and scaring anybody. So if Dylan Gabriel comes in, it probably will be when they feel like, they're not winning any divisions or coming close to any playoffs. But until they do, I think Joe's going to be the quarterback. Their defense will keep him in a lot of games, but Kevin wants to run the football, and Dylan Gabriel is much more a play action, bootleg, think and dunk around the yard guy.
Mike, you're the best. Really appreciate your time. Good time now to bring a quarterback into the conversation. Brian Hoyer, welcome. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. Thanks for having me on, Sam. We've spoken on SiriusXM, the opening drive, so great to see you put a face with a voice.
We mentioned earlier in the show, Brian, the details about your resume that make you a specifically interesting voice in this conversation. When you hear people screaming for a rookie to go in, what goes through your head that you think might not be something that the rest of us without your experience are considering?
Man, I mean, other than me, Josh McCown, and Ryan Fitzpatrick, I mean, you couldn't have went wrong asking any of us three. We've kind of seen it all. Now, the one thing I would say is, looking back on my career, man, I was nowhere near ready to play my rookie year, even though I was backing up Tom Brady. And honestly, I didn't feel comfortable being an NFL quarterback until I was going into my third season. And I wasn't playing a lot. Like I mentioned, I was a backup. And it's just so much weight to carry. I remember becoming the starter for the Cleveland Browns the first year. And obviously, everyone sees what happens on Sundays. But what goes into your daily life, the amount, and a lot of it I learned from Tom Brady, how he prepared, what he was thinking about each and every day. And then you get to the part, and I never even reached this, but like being the face of a franchise, the hopes and dreams all being put on your shoulders as a young player. I can't even imagine. Most recently, I watched it here in New England with Drake May last year. I was here when Mac Jones was a rookie and won the job in training camp. And so it's all, it's not a one size fits all approach. I think it's a case by case basis. How much can that guy take on? How much is the team ready to surround him and be the right team for him to be successful? And we've seen, I think now more than ever, we see these reclamation projects who are now starting to shine. And Baker Mayfield comes to mind. Number one, I think he's a top 5 quarterback this year, the way he's been playing. And then just a few years ago, he was playing for the Carolina Panthers along with Sam Darnold when they visited us here in New England in training camp. And both of those guys couldn't make it stick in Carolina. So it goes to show you, and Solomon Wilcots has a great saying, it's about the garden that you get to grow in. And if you go to a fertile garden, I think you're more likely to have success. And if you go to one that's arid and hasn't been watered, and usually if these guys are getting drafted as high as they are, it's probably because the team's not great or in the right situation to surround them. So it's really not a one size fits all approach. And I think it has to do with the team, the coaches, and then the player themselves.
So talking about that garden, Brian, in particular with Jackson Dart being moved into the starting position, there seems to be some flowers that are sprouting. Malik Neighbors seems to be an excellent wide receiver. We've seen an emergence of Cam Scatteraboo, and the running game has been able to be at least moderately effective in the last couple of weeks. Do you think that's a good setup? And what else do you think a quarterback needs in that garden to really be successful as a rookie?
Yeah, I mean, those are two great skill players to pair with him. Obviously, young players, too, that will grow with him. It's not like they're, in their 4th or 5th year. I think that's the one good thing you see is they're all going to grow together at this point. Now, I would say, other than skill players that they have to go to, you want an offensive line that's going to protect the guy, right? You don't want him to be gun shy because he sacked a bunch. And I'm wondering if a big reason other than, just feeling the pressure is the Giants are hoping that maybe Jackson Dart's athleticism can maybe avoid some of the pressure that they're getting. I mean, we don't know. Only those people in that building will know. But also, I think it gets to a point, and I've been the veteran on the other side trying to hold off a rookie as well. And sometimes that weight, as much as you want to stay positive about it, it's not avoidable, especially in a city like New York. So for Russell Wilson, I mean, imagine going out there every week and being like, I want to play good because I want to win, but also I know if I don't, there's a guy that they're clamoring for to bring in. And so the one thing I would say is I believe Brian Daboll is a great coach. If you really look at a guy like Josh Allen, who took a while to get to where he's at, he really started to blossom when Daboll got to Buffalo. And I think that's something to be said. You have a guy who has learned from a lot of great coaches and has a good offensive system, one that I'm very familiar with and I believe in. And I think you saw what Jackson Dart was able to do in the preseason, which gives a lot of people a lot of hope. But as we all know, the preseason is a different animal. I mean, it's vanilla coverages. They're not bringing these exotic blitzes. And then it's the day-to-day. How do you become a pro? On Tuesdays in New England, we'd meet with Bill Belichick for almost 2.5 hours. And that was just what we were supposed to do. That wasn't, what we were going to do on our own. And so it's just a matter of understanding, like, you're not just the quarterback. There's so much more that goes into it. And I think sometimes those young guys are a little naive to it, which can be a good thing, right? And then every once in a while, you get someone to come along like Jaden Daniels, who's just so poised, who has what my son would call aura, and the players respond to it. And every week last year, it just seemed like he got more and more comfortable. And it's unfortunate now he had to sit out this past week, but hoping to see him continue to grow in that development. So I think, like I said, there's some guys who are really ready for it. I think Jaden played like what you would wrote better than me, like almost 60 games in college, as opposed to a guy like Drake May, who maybe have played like 22 or 23. And so now all of a sudden you're out there, and I was talking about it on our podcast today. Like, Drake May is so big and so athletic. Some of the stuff he got away with in high school and in college, he's finding out, like, I can't be surrounded by 3-4 defensive linemen in the pocket and be like, oh, I'll just flick the ball to the running back. It just doesn't work at this level. And so there's that learning curve as well.
What, in your experience, are the toughest parts of the game? Where is the learning curve biggest for these rookies?
I think the majority, or the biggest curve, is just how different each week is. I mean, the variety of defenses you're seeing, the variety of game planning that's being put in, and it's really, 17 one-week seasons. And so what worked last week against the Minnesota Vikings may not work the next week against the Houston Texans, and you have to be able to adapt. And I think, there's some coaches who do a good job of handling that. I saw a great article, and maybe you guys could look it up and reference it, but they were talking about just how to foster an environment around a young quarterback. And they talked about the Commanders and what Dan Quinn was able to do. He's like, we laid it all out. We wanted to have a great backup quarterback in the room who would push him, but would also be supportive and help him and teach from his experiences. We want a great coaching staff that was going to be able to not only work on him fundamentally, but learning defenses and all of those things. And we also wanted him to earn the job. We didn't want to give it to him, so he would go out there and earn it in front of his teammates. And so I thought their plan for Jaden was really good. And they even talked about, I think, look, we didn't want him to have to be too much of a leader in year one. We wanted him to focus on his job and have a Bobby Wagner, have a Zach Ertz, have these guys around him. And then now, as he steps into year two, he's established himself. The guys trust him. They believe in him. Now he can take more of that leadership role. And so, I think they've done a tremendous job with building. And you talk about, kind of fostering that garden around him. And then they go in, they trade for Laramie Tunsil. They get Deebo Samuel. They realize he's on a rookie contract. He's proven that we can believe in him. Let's go build and put some more pieces around him.
In terms of that point that you just brought up about being in a supportive environment, I'm curious how strongly you feel about, once you go to this guy, you got to stick with him. Because weirdly, and not to put you on the spot, but that was one thing that I specifically noticed or thought with Mac Jones in New England that I did not feel like he had the benefit of.
Yeah. Well, I think in year one, he had the garden, he had the flowers, as you put it, he had everything around him. He had Josh McDaniels, who did a tremendous job with him. And I think I'll never forget when I thought Mac earned the job, because this is kind of the question you're asking about. And there was a joint practice against the New York Giants, and Cam Newton was out with COVID, and I had tore my meniscus the day before. And so it was literally Mac by himself in a practice. It was probably 92 degrees. We had like an 80 play practice, and he was flawless. And I thought to myself, he just won the job right there. And he proved to the team he was mentally ready. He competed his butt off against the New York Giants. I mean, this was his first time, obviously in a controlled environment, but going against the first team guys of an NFL team. And I mean, he was very, very good. I remember he had an interception and he was able to move on from it, like a big thing. How does a guy handle adversity? Some of these guys don't have a lot of adversity in college. And I was like, I walked away thinking like he earned the job that day. And so I think in year 2, what happened was, Josh leaves for Vegas, and now we have a new setup, a new dynamic, and we're trying to figure everything out. And then all of a sudden he starts to, question things, and it went downhill really quickly. And so, I look at a guy like Bryce Young last year. When they benched him, I'm like, God, you just drafted him with the first pick just a year ago. How's this going to go? But it showed his resiliency, right? He watched Andy Dalton. I mean, how valuable was it for him to watch Andy Dalton kind of take the reins for a little bit and learn how a veteran guy who's done it before just operates? He had never seen that before. And then he came back and had himself a good end of the year last year. And so, look, as tough as we pretend or act to be, we're human beings as well. And so there's the emotional side that can weigh on you too. So some guys can handle it, and some guys it's just maybe sometimes it's too much to bear.
Keeping with the discussion about the long-term development, there's been a lot of discussion about how the front office, the coaching staff could be on the hot seat. How much do you think it affects a quarterback's development, as you kind of discussed with Mac Jones, to have to relearn a completely different system? Obviously, with Belichick, it was still a lot of the same infrastructure, but a new offensive structure. There's a chance for Jackson Dart, if this doesn't go well, it could be a whole new crew with a whole new offense. How hard is that jump from one season in one system to another season in another?
Yeah, it's tough because I think where you really take strides of growth is when you have continuity and you're able to come back in that first OTA after your first year, like Jaden Daniels probably did with Cliff Kingsbury. And instead of trying to build those foundational pieces, you're like, okay, I got, the foundation of the offense, let's call it like base 75% of it. Like, what can we add? What can we keep growing with? And so, you see guys who have new coordinator year after year, and it's like starting from square one. Yeah, they have the experience and they've played, but as you well know, I mean, a lot of these offenses are they're not that dissimilar, right? No one's reinventing the wheel. The plays are the plays, but the way that they're called in the huddle, the way that the reads are taught, I mean, there are some variations there. And so, like for me, for instance, my first tenure in the NFL was in New England with Bill O'Brien as the offensive coordinator. So that's what I knew. So every system I went to after that, I always related back. That's like your native tongue, right? And so now you're like, okay, if it's Utah Toga in that system, well, it's dig seam in this system. So now I'm just going to remember it that way. And so it's kind of like adding foreign language after foreign language. So that I would say is like the hardest part, because there's a lot of terminology you have to break down. And then playing football is playing football, but I could be taught how to read a play differently from Kyle Shanahan to Josh McDaniels. And so now how do you retain that and do it the way that coach wants to do it? And so I think you kind of get set in your ways a little bit with what you first learn, and then how adaptable can you be?
Mayock and you have now both mentioned several times the mental toughness component to all of this being necessary for a rookie starting, because the inevitable setbacks that are going to come up. In your experience, is that something easy to evaluate, whether someone has that or not, before you make that decision?
I mean, if they could evaluate it, I think Tom Brady would have been the first pick in the NFL as opposed to 199. And so that's the thing, the nuance with all of sports and with all of the position players, with everybody, but with quarterback more than ever. I mean, how does Brock Purdy end up as Mr. Irrelevant? Because there are certain things that you can't evaluate unless you go and meet with the guy and have a feeling. And how many people are going to go and draft a guy in the first round off of a feeling when he's got a 5th round grade when it comes to skill level or production or whatever it might be? I mean, how did I, as an undrafted free agent, last 15 years in the NFL? Well, I knew how to digest a playbook, and I could figure it out, and I could go out there and execute and try to get better. And so each person is different. And I've seen, and I'm sure everybody's seen, guys who are immensely talented who it just doesn't work out for whatever reason. Maybe it's a bad situation. Maybe they can't retain information. Maybe they've never had to handle adversity, and now all of a sudden they're hit with it and they don't know how to deal with it. So there's so many variables when it comes to the quarterback position. And I thought Tom Brady on his thing with Colin Cowherd. He nailed it. I know people loved it, but he said, don't give these people the benefit of the doubt. The ones that are running these organizations, that are the coaches, that are the GMs. I mean, they're not always that qualified to be able to make that decision or train these guys the right way. Because if it was true, then we wouldn't see so many guys who kind of fizzle out. I think that's the biggest thing. And I always say, if you took every starter and backup in the NFL and you put them through, remember the old Pro Bowl, like, let's do the skills competition, who could hit the moving targets and who could throw it far. Like, it's not that big of a difference physically, right? It's who can handle it mentally, who can process it. I mean, there's going to be the, 5 to 9 guys who are elite throwers of the football, the Aaron Rodgers, the Patrick Mahomes, the Josh Allens, the Justin Herberts, that will, Matt Stafford, who could really separate themselves, but everybody else is kind of going to be in that same category. And so I think so much of it is here and here. And how do you really measure that other than getting in a room with a guy and getting a feel? Guy that I loved, I was doing some pre-draft stuff, and thankfully now with the internet and everything, we can see, like, Will Howard out of Ohio State. I was like, man, there's just something, like, I see this kid talk and I see him show up in the college football playoffs, and in the biggest moments he plays his best football. And then I saw him on Gruden's quarterback show, and I was like, I love this kid. I think he's gonna be a great player. And so now we talk about development of quarterbacks. He's going to get to sit there with Aaron Rodgers for a year and see how Aaron does things as a pro, a guy who's going to be a Hall of Famer, and he's got a good quarterback coach and a friend of mine in Tom Arth. And so I look at him and I'm like, well, maybe he's going to have more success than some of the guys who were drafted ahead of him, because he's going to a better situation. He's going to sit for a little bit and learn, and he just has something about him. And we won't know until he gets his opportunity. But you want to talk about measuring heart or mental toughness or whatever it was. I watched him in those interviews, and I was like, he's got it.
So going from the macro, the mental toughness, to the micro, you mentioned that it's a 1-week season, and there was an interesting bit on the broadcast about how Jackson Dart was Patrick Mahomes last week in preparation.
It was always my favorite week on scout team. I tell Pat all the time, I'm like, I attempted one behind my back this week. I dropped back 20 yards and threw it as far as I could, and he would always get a laugh out of that. But man, when you're Patrick Mahomes on scout team, there's really no rules.
Right. So definitely with you mentioning that, there's no rules, and now he's going to a rule set with all of his teammates and a rule set governed by the defense and checks. What is the mental process starting at the beginning of the week of flipping that switch to go from I'm trying to give someone a look to it's time to execute on Sunday?
Well, one of the greatest things for me, at least early in my career being a scout team quarterback in New England, we were not the team that said, hey, throw a few interceptions to these guys today to make them feel good. If anything, Bill was like, tear these guys up. So I want to know where the weaknesses are. I want them to know where the guys might try to throw the ball in these certain zones or man coverages. And so I was encouraged to play well on scout team. If I just threw not a shitty interception, a bad interception, I would get called out for it. It was like they're not going to do this, or why would he throw it there? And I remember watching a thing about Aaron when he was backing up Favre. He's like, I took scout team and learned, what can I get away with? Can I fit an in cut into a tight hole? And so I think you get that. You learn like the speed of the game. How much can I push it? Now you shift to being the starting quarterback. You keep that in the back of your mind, but now everything is about making sure you're efficient, making sure you protect the football, all of those things. And look, it's going to be the guy's first time in an NFL game and first season. There are going to be growing pains. Even Jaden Daniels, in the amazing year he had last year, he had that. The biggest thing is, how do you learn from those and not be a mistake repeater? I think that's what I love from Drake May, watching him, obviously being up here in New England. He doesn't tend to make the same mistake twice. Now, he's making mistakes still, but usually he doesn't make the same one over and over again. And when you see that from a young guy, it makes you believe that eventually he's going to get to the point. I mean, look, I think Josh Allen's the greatest quarterback in the NFL right now, but it took him a while to get to the point where he knew how to turn on the plays where he extends it and throws it across his body, and when to pull back. And I think there's a fine line, especially with the way we're training quarterbacks now, right? It's good to be athletic. It's good to use that athleticism, but at a certain point, you don't want to use it to your disadvantage. So a guy like Caleb Williams, I mean, he played incredible the other day. A lot of his throws were in rhythm. He didn't have to try to extend a play and make a hero play. And so you don't want to coach out the athleticism from these guys, but you also got to make them understand, like, look, it's okay sometimes to throw the football away or to take a sack. I mean, those are things that maybe sometimes they've never been taught that. So, but it's just, I mean, there's so much that goes into it. And I think everybody has their own time when they're ready. I mean, ideally, I think how the Chiefs treated Mahomes in his rookie year, and he got to be there with Alex. And I saw him in this preseason. He's like, I can't thank Alex Smith enough for what I learned from him. And then he got to play in that last regular season game. And then all of a sudden, boom, he came on the scene. And it was like no one had ever seen someone come on and be so explosive and ready to go. And so I think that's probably the ideal situation, but that's a 1 in a million situation to have a guy who can play and be a winner for your team and also be great to the young guy in the room and then move on to somewhere else. So it's definitely unique to each place.
I talked to Kurt Warner in preparation for this podcast because he's been in this specific situation on both sides, right? And in New York, coincidentally, he was in this situation as the veteran when they put in Eli. And one of the things that he mentioned there was, and it kind of goes back to the support and the environment being good. It wasn't a good team. So in that sense, it wasn't necessarily a good environment, but he was a big believer that the support system really needed to, once they moved to Eli, they needed to stick with that.
Yep.
And he gave a specific example of a time that Eli was really struggling against Baltimore in his rookie year. And they put Kurt in and he ended up kind of getting them back in the game and playing really well. And to the point where it was really obvious, the disparity. Like, this is a professional quarterback, and this guy is still in the process of becoming one. And when he walked off the field, he said he pulled the coach aside and didn't know where he was going before his press conference, but he said, you have to go to the podium and say explicitly, Eli's our guy.
Yeah.
Because once you start to waver, people will start to, everyone starts to waver. Eli wavers, everybody wavers. Yep. And so I feel like you're describing a situation like that as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's 100% true. And I think that's the mental part of it, right? When you turn it over to somebody, like, at least for the rest of that season, you got to ride with the highs and lows. I really believe that. I mean, I didn't have the same scenario, but when I was in Vegas for my last season, Jimmy G got hurt, and I was the backup, but they decided to go with Aiden O'Connell. He had a really good preseason, and I think the fans wanted to see him play, and so he leapfrogged me. And I love Aiden; he's a great kid, and he had a rough first half against the Chargers in that first start. And one of the coaches came up to me at halftime, was like, "Hey, be ready to go." And I go, "Look, this is my 15th year. Don't do this to this kid, okay? Let's let him get back out there and fight, because once you do that, do you know what that's going to do to his confidence going forward?" And sure enough, he fought back and had a really good second half. And Jimmy comes back a few weeks later, gets hurt again. I end up going back in as the backup in the middle of the Patriots game, and we beat the Patriots. But the next week I got the start. It didn't go well. And then everything got blown up, and Aiden started the rest of that year, and he played really well. And I think a lot of that had to do with he had to fight through that first half that was not great, and they didn't pull him. And so he was like, all right, I can battle back from this. And so there is a huge mental part of it too.
What scenarios do you think the team or are there any scenarios where you think that the team should prioritize short-term goals, maximizing one-year success over long-term goals in this type of a situation? And I might be thinking about the Vikings specifically as a team that maybe, like, are they a team that checks that box?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? There's a lot of factors. There's the growth and development of your quarterback. There's the rest of the guys on the team who want to be successful. I mean, I think that was my biggest question in this offseason. Like, okay, Minnesota, you must really trust JJ McCarthy, because Sam Darnold had a hell of a year and you're just going to let him walk, right? And so those guys in that locker room are probably thinking, okay, like, JJ better come in right where Sam left off. And that's not a realistic expectation for a guy, right? And so obviously he's going to have to deal with that injury now, and you're going to have to see where he comes back, and Carson Wentz filled in nicely. But to your point, like, how do you make sure the team knows you're about winning while also trying to develop this guy at quarterback? And so that's a tightrope that I'm glad I don't have to really worry about.
So I'm very interested in that unique relationship between the quarterback and the offensive line and the wide receivers and the running back, because the quarterback really navigates the ship. When Jackson Dart steps into this new role, or if JJ McCarthy comes back in, or when Carson Wentz, what are the first steps that you have to get everyone on the same page, especially given that new nomenclature, the differences in the cadence and things like that?
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I think, that's where the older veteran guys, I mean, I think it's probably a little bit easier for the Giants, because I don't know what their expectation level is. It's not going well yet. Like, okay, we understand what the situation is. We're going to have to adapt. We're going to have to adjust, and we're going to have to do the best we can to make Jackson feel comfortable. As opposed to Minnesota, like they have playoff hopes and expectations, and they're thinking about Super Bowls. And so, JJ goes out. I mean, obviously has a great comeback in week 1. It doesn't look so great in week 2. Now Carson's in there. That's going to be, and thank God they have Kevin O'Connell, who I think is probably one of the best coaches in the league. And you see how his team responds to him, and he's going to have to feel the pulse of that team. Where are we at? Like, if Carson Wentz is the hot hand and JJ's now dealing with another injury and he's not getting all these reps, like, how do you navigate that? And I think, he's a young coach. He's a former player. He'll have an understanding on how to do that, because it is a fine line on how to make that decision. Because if you say, let's just say Carson Wentz wins 3 more games while JJ's out, and all of a sudden he comes back and he struggles, like, they're going to look to you and say, are we putting Carson back in? Are we trying to develop this guy?
Yeah.
Are we going to the play? Like, that's a lot to manage. And so that's why, I'm glad I'm not in those shoes to have to make those decisions.
That's such a tough situation and so specific, right? Because they made a decision. They wanted to build and develop JJ, and then because of an injury, they have to put Carson in. Carson having success now creates this really weird dynamic that I would imagine is just weird for everybody.
Yeah, it's obviously Carson's role is the backup. So if a guy's injured, you got to come in and fill in for the guy. So they're probably happy, right? I mean, Carson Wentz has only been there for like a month before he had to go play a game. So I'm sure they're ecstatic. Like, hey, we got this veteran guy. He came in. He won the game. But the dynamic will be interesting is if he continues to have success, guys are going to say, well, he's kind of playing better than JJ is. Like, what's the decision? And that's a tough decision to make. And honestly, that's not the pressure you want to put on your young quarterback as well. I mean, can you imagine he watches Carson Wentz go out there and play well for 3 weeks, and all of a sudden he's back out? He's like, man, I better not mess this up. And you don't want a guy playing like that either.
And he probably knows to a degree, like, I can't do some of these things yet. Like,
Sure.
that's natural. Like, you want to think like, and that's different than being confident. That's different than believing in yourself. Like, you have to also have some self-awareness about where you are in your development curve, right?
Yeah, 100%.
What do you think? Okay, last question. In terms of just, like, if the Giants called you up, Brian Daboll, was like, what are the most important things that we do here so that we don't mess this up for Jackson or for us long term?
Yeah,
what would you tell him?
One, I would be, very poignant with the play calling, right? I think the one thing as a young player, you want to hear plays come in your helmet that you feel comfortable with. And if that means you have to shrink the volume down, that's okay. Like, there's nothing worse playing quarterback. And a few times I was doing everything I could to be the starting quarterback in situations. And so even if I didn't like a play and they're like, hey, what about this one? I'm like, yeah, I got it. Like what you just said, like I can do it. But when that play call came in my helmet in the game, I was like, oh man, I really hope it wasn't this play. Right. And so I think that's the biggest thing when you have a young guy, spend that extra time with him, make sure he's good. And if you got to take out 20 to 30, look, you're only going to run about 60 plays anyways. And so to go in with 110 plays and know that you're only going to run 60, you better narrow it down to 80 and hope that he's really good with those 80. And then secondly, I would just say, like, look, I'm not saying you want to baby him. You hold him accountable, but you make sure you bring him along and make sure he understands, the situation. And when he has a mistake, like, okay, yeah, you made a mistake. We're not saying you're not going to make mistakes, but give him the tools to make sure he doesn't repeat that. And then ultimately, you just got to find a way for the team to rally around him. And how do you create that? Well, you put him in tough situations and help him through it. And with every success that he has, the team believes in him a little bit more.
Brian, I can tell that this whole broadcasting career for you is going to work out pretty well. Where can we hear you now?
So like I mentioned before, Sirius XM NFL Radio, Thursday morning, 7 to 10, opening drive with Solomon Wilcots. I do a fun podcast with my former teammate, David Andrews. It's called The Quick Snap. It's on NBC Sports Boston. And then I also have a local Patriots thing up here in New England, Patriots This Week with Bob Sosi and Scott Zolak, who call the games on the radio up here. So I'm doing enough to keep myself busy, keep myself in the game, watching film. And I was telling you guys before, I did the Monday morning show. I had to switch with someone on the first Monday after all the games. And man, I like to go to bed early, and I woke up at 5 a.m. and I'm watching game recap after game recap to make sure I caught up on everything.
Monday morning. That's the toughest turnaround, man. You
Yeah,
got to
for
know
sure.
everything real quick.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. Your
Yeah, no
perspective
problem.
is really valuable here, I think.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Well, Sam, that was a very interesting exercise talking to both of those guys with their varying perspectives. And the fact that they were pretty consistent, I think, in the things that they actually said that we needed to keep our eye out for.
Right. I think the most important and interesting thing that they brought to the table is their experience of the non-quantifiable things, but that definitely exist. The pressures, I think, from the rest of the 53-man roster and from the building itself that have to be managed by not only the quarterback moving up, but the other quarterbacks in the room and the executive GM, head coach, etc., is like so mounting and so clear that that is a major part of success. And I think they both really highlighted both of those pressures and considerations extremely well in a way that I had never really thought about.
One of the things that we haven't actually tapped into is how draft pick, how much a team is invested in you or what they have invested in you and how that plays into this. And I wonder if there are differences there in terms of how you treat somebody who is, the 4th overall pick versus somebody that you got later in the first round versus a 3rd rounder versus whatever.
Yeah, I think that was a really interesting part of Brian's discussion because here Brian is someone who has pretty much seen it all. He's been there for 15 years. He's been on Super Bowl winning teams and been around Super Bowl winning folks. And Aiden O'Connell was like a 3rd or 4th round draft pick. He's often the one that I use as like the true average rookie quarterback, ironically, because he was a 3rd or 4th round draft pick. And him being able to ID that you couldn't crush that kid's confidence because the team believes in him was a really interesting form and facet, especially given how he was talking about Mac Jones, who was a 1st round pick. I think it really is. I don't want to say it's truly a vibe, but as it goes in football, there's a true buy-in that must be had. And to understand how Brian and how Mike Mayock thought about the management of the vibes was really interesting.
I also wonder if that situation, that makes me think about the Giants and how this will be moving forward because so Brian was in this situation a lot.
Right.
And witnessed, good approaches, bad approaches. And somebody who was in his position would maybe approach that differently as the person that the coach is coming to than like a Russell Wilson who hasn't been in that situation, who has been a career starter and is looking to establish a legacy and doesn't want to go out a certain way. Like the dynamic in that room might be very, very different in New York.
It's a really excellent point as it goes down the stretch in the season, which from one perspective you could see Russ being put on the trade block and maybe having some value, but like all discussions typically when it comes to Jameis is that he's like the consummate teammate, will support everyone, has supported everyone from Deshaun Watson down to Dorian Thompson-Robinson. And then with Russ, it's kind of a big question mark, right? Because we saw him kind of get into it with Sean Payton. We saw him reclaim the job from Justin Fields. Then Justin Fields was getting other reps, and there were rumors of discussions with Arthur Smith. And not to say that he's a combative guy, but he's just certainly a starting quarterback in the National Football League in terms of persona.
Even Joe Flacco in Cleveland, if and when they decide to move to a rookie, he's been in this situation before. He kind of knows the drill. Like he knows he's there, I would imagine, as a bridge. Like he's not thinking they're building around him for the future. He's old. Right. Like Russ is like trying to be the guy still. So I do wonder how that dynamic will play out there.
Exactly. And I loved your breakdown of the schedule of the Browns and the Giants as well, because that I think is the most intriguing thing to me. Like you look at currently the win total for the Giants, and they basically already lost a game off their preseason. So in essence, Russ has cost them a game. But how does that really change given you're having to face these extremely incredible defense, and in particular, these defenses in the Broncos who are going to blitz an absolute ton, and the Eagles who aren't going to blitz a ton, but have very effective defensive linemen. And I'm really going to be interested in particular with how Jackson Dart manages the defensive line talent that he's going to face, because we've seen JJ McCarthy, we've talked about a lot, not manage that extremely well. High sack rate, high scramble rate, not able to get the targets to the Justin Jeffersons of the world, some of the best guys in the league. And so I think those are two stats that I'm going to keep a very close eye on, is the pressure rate, sack rate, those decisions that the quarterback makes on his own that he can technically go another way. If those are sky high, it could look pretty ugly as we go into that gauntlet with the Eagles and the Broncos.
Yeah, this is a really tough schedule here for the Giants moving forward. I do wonder too, though, you're expecting volatility out of the rookie, right? Like, so that's baked into this. We know that it's just going to be all over the place. The fact that it was all over the place with the veteran might be the thing that kind of pushes it towards the rookie in this situation. Like, I can't even count on you to give me a floor, because Russell Wilson this week, I don't remember if I mentioned this off the top, from a SumerScore standpoint, he was literally number 1 in the NFL last week.
Right.
Number 1, had the best SumerScore rating after week 2, and then the worst this week. Like, that is a volatile, I have no idea what I'm going to get from you. But I also think that the points that Mike Mayock made are consistent with what I feel like I have seen and looked at from a number standpoint, and that is that the things that he did in week 2 are not sustainable. Like, a defense is, we talked about this last week, I think, like, a defense is going to figure out how to stop his moon ball. Right. So if you do that, then what else do you have? And I think we kind of saw some examples of that this past week.
That's a great point, Lindsay, because you put it in context, and some of our data scientists have worked really hard to put all of these SumerScores in context. Like last year, it was last week, it was a true all-pro performance. This week, it was a performance that you shouldn't be in the league. You shouldn't be a backup or a starter, period.
That's wild.
And so we always talk about in fantasy football, increasing the distribution, right? If you already have a wide distribution, which it's hard to think about that with regards to Russell Wilson because we've seen him play so much, but you're putting in a rookie, really all you're doing is adding to the upside, which already hasn't necessarily been there, or trying to add consistency, which is a really, really excellent point, Lindsay. And I think it really is going to be interesting, the following things. Number one, how Daboll changes the offense if we do see more design runs. And number two, if the long-term thinking that Mike talked about is prevalent amongst Daboll and Shane, because if we see them just start going for it, yanking him out of the games, really just trying to win as many games to save their job, I think this could go south very quickly. But if they do take the long-term approach and maybe start looking like the Carolina Panthers looked last year, where, you know, they didn't win a ton of games. However, back half of the year, they're really challenging teams. Jackson Dart really starts to kind of put it together. Accuracy increases, negative plays decrease. I think that could be a recipe for success for everyone involved.
This is not a specifically quarterback analogy, but I just thought of the Lions in their first year with Dan Campbell. And I was thinking about this last night, patting myself on the back, all by myself on my couch. That first year, it was so obvious that they were building something, right? And they weren't winning the games, but they were fighting and they were scrappy and all that kind of stuff. And I wonder if that is a win, if they can just show that, even if it's turning wins or losses, whatever this year. Like, I don't think anybody's expecting them to win a Super Bowl in any scenario. So if that's out the window, then is that a win at the end of the year? If you can just go like, this is clearly going somewhere good.
100%. And I hope for the sake of Dart and for the sake of good football, that this doesn't become a dumpster fire by week 6, where we have lame duck coaches or offensive coordinators coaching the team and it's just a full rebuild. Because I do think there are good bones to this team. I think it's just about making it work and making it work in the right ways.
One of the things that Kurt Warner also said about that first year when they moved to Eli was that they had a first-year head coach. And I wonder how much that dynamic is really, really valuable in that situation, so that you're not looking, even if you're the rookie quarterback in this situation and you're looking at a coach and you're hearing from the outside that they're on the hot seat, like the added pressure that puts on you when we're talking about all this mental toughness that comes into play. You got to sit there and look at your head coach and go like, I'm going to struggle. Like, I don't want to struggle. I'm going to try my hardest, but you're going to lose your job if I struggle.
Yeah. I also want to note as we look kind of as the cards start to turn over a little bit more in all of these situations, you have Brian Callahan having real heat in Tennessee right now, giving up play calling duties after onboarding a rookie quarterback. I don't think there's any question marks as it pertains to Brian Flores and Kevin O'Connell, but there's definitely questions there. But really unique situation in Atlanta with Raheem Morris, who is a retread head coach, second year, probably not on the hot seat per se. They won a standard amount of games last year. They seem to be in a place to win the same amount this year, but a lot of that offensive staff is no longer with them. They were let go in the early week here. Zach Robinson moving down from the box onto the sideline. Clearly, that's not his preference. And so the amount of
Penix's preference.
It's a good point. It could be. Yeah, it could be. But the changes, I think, are interesting when you're tying a quarterback to where the offensive coordinator is, the like quite literally like the careers of the assistant coaches or the head coach. And I'm almost coming to a conclusion after these two conversations that sometimes it really is better to just reshuffle the deck if you're going to take a shot on a quarterback, so that you can align the timelines of the head coach, the offense coordinator, and the quarterback. And I think that's why the Lions were really successful. I think if the Panthers are going to be successful this year, that's probably a big part of it as well. And I think that level of build just may be worth the risk of having a head coach who doesn't necessarily know what he's doing.
Yeah, I wish the Bears had done that. It feels pretty clear to me. Last question. Do you think we've seen the last of Russell Wilson?
I gotta think we did this year. I don't foresee a way that he comes back and it's a successful addition for the Giants.
For someone else? Do you think there's anyone else out there that's like, I'll bite? Like, I mean, the Giants bit. We saw this guy in Pittsburgh. The Broncos said no the year before that. Like, it's not like there wasn't some evidence that this is what was going to happen.
I think from the data perspective, as someone who didn't think they should have pulled the trigger just yet, for a myriad of reasons, I just don't foresee how you can jump from 3 different teams and then be trusted to be a starter again, especially if there's like behind the scenes stuff where everyone was just bought into Dart in the building, which obviously we don't know about any of that. Perhaps it'll come out in an article before or after the season, but I think we're more likely to see Jameis start for any of the 32 teams than we will be Russell Wilson for the rest of the year.
I think I agree. You just said that you were not bought into this decision. Have you changed your mind, or are you still there?
I think I'm still there. I don't know if the garden, as we've talked about, is there for Dart right now. And I think it's going to be really tough to go into a stadium and fail against a team who is good, dare I say, excellent at making quarterbacks fail. We saw them put Geno Smith, Johnny on the spot, in a terrible position, had one of the worst games in National Football League history in terms of EPA. And that's a 35-year-old quarterback who has seen and done it all in Geno Smith. And I think when you line up in the shotgun and you're staring at Derwin James looking at you in the face in a Jesse Minter offense where he's going to be lined up at 8 different positions, and you're not necessarily, as Brian said, the most comfortable of all time. And I can relate with what Brian said at a much lower level. I didn't feel as if I was a good linebacker until I was a junior, until my 3rd year. So I can't even imagine what the hoop is at the quarterback position in the National Football League, especially given someone who played for 15 years, a consummate professional who definitely had the discipline, the understanding, and was in a franchise that valued those things. If he didn't feel valuable until his 3rd year in the league, can't imagine what it's going to be feeling like in MetLife for Jackson Dart.
Sidebar before we go, it makes me so happy that we're talking about the Chargers this way. Like,
it's great.
I mean, forget that I live in LA, forget any of that. Like, just like the Chargers, who have a reputation for chargering, and the way that we've always talked about them, and like, wait for it, the shoe will drop. Like, the fact that people are legitimately excited about not even the offense, they're talking about the defense this way. Like, it's kind of cool.
Well, the biggest difference is their willingness to just put the ball in Justin Herbert's hands at this point. That's not something I expected from Harbaugh. But Lindsay, not to be offense, But the biggest charging thing ever would be to go into MetLife
Don't do
and
that.
get
Don't
lit
do
up
that.
by Passion Tart.
Thank you for being with us today. Can't listen to the rest of that sentence. I'm going to go buy myself a Charger sweatshirt, but also good luck to Jackson Dart and our producer, Matt Stopsky, whose hands just flew up in the air.
Let's fucking go, Sam.
Thanks for listening to the Super Sports Show.